Well, welcome everybody. We're delighted to have you here for a fireside chat with David Farr. David is an Owen alum and has spent his career at Emerson. Started his first job out of Owen at Emerson.
Yep.
Has now been leading the company for 17 plus years, coming in as CEO in 2000. And Emerson is one of these storied companies. Many of you have probably read about Emerson even as part of your MBA education. There's a number of famous cases about the company. And one of the things that, of course, is remarkable about Emerson is something like 60 consecutive years of increasing dividends to shareholders. That's no small trick.
Yeah.
And David, of course, been a huge part of that, really cutting his teeth in all different parts of the business as he worked his way into the CEO and then CEO and chairman role.
Correct.
And besides that, he's very involved now with NAM, the National Association of Manufacturers, has had a big voice in the last couple of years representing U.S. interests around manufacturing, what's happening in manufacturing, and I think an important voice there in a turbulent time in some ways, but
got lucky.
One that's doing well for manufacturers right now. And I want to start off by, we were talking a little bit about this history of Emerson, and first of all, certainly our condolences, David, thinking about your mentor. I've heard you sometimes even quoted as saying kind of a second father, Chuck Knight, the prior CEO, was to you. Thoughts on Chuck and his legacy?
Emerson's an interesting company. You said I'm only the third CEO since 1954. And to think I'm the only living CEO today. Well, you can't say that about most Fortune 150 companies. But Chuck was a unique individual. Chuck came out from the outside from the previous CEO. His name was Buck Persons, and Buck had no successor, so he was going through a successor time period back in the early 70s. And Chuck came from a consulting firm. His dad ran a consulting firm, and he was brought in to sort of work with Mr. Persons to try to figure out how to create a successor. And out of that process, he was chosen at a very young age, 36 years old. The company was about $700 million at that time, and he ran it for 27 years. And so when I took over in 2000, he was always there. He was an interesting guy because I worked for him for many, many years, and got to know him. I had him down here at Owens one time in the new school, first year out of school. You don't remember this, but Chuck was unusual. Sometimes he pulled out a permanent marker and wrote on your whiteboard. And I said, I said, Chuck, you can't do that. He had written a whole sentence already. So so we worked for hours trying to get that off. But he was a very close friend, and it's interesting. He died of Alzheimer's. I've been watching lately. There's been a lot of, we just lost Mr. Bain, who founded our Bain and Company, had Alzheimer's, and tough life for guys that sort of lead their life in a high-paced business to go that way. And for the last 3 or 4 years, he didn't know exactly what he was doing, but a great guy. He was always there for me, and he was like my second dad. So I lost my dad in late 16, and then I lost Chuck in 17. And so it's been a tough time period there. But for the first couple of weeks, I used to wake up and say, man, I can't screw up now. I'm the only living guy that can run the company. So you can figure out how to make sure I find my successor soon, which we're working on.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting.
An interesting history. And you know that both Bill Bain and Bruce Henderson had big Vanderbilt connections.
Yes, they did. So.
It is one of these things that I think it's a story that's not well been written, but essentially both Bain and BCG came out of Vanderbilt.
Came out of Vanderbilt. And when we brought in Bain because I got to know Bain from my day in Henderson for the days we were at, I was here.
Yeah, sure.
And so, because I went to school at the mortuary, and they probably don't know about the mortuary, but that's where the first school was, is over the mortuary, right? The Wendy's over there, which is not there anymore either. But I got to know him, and so we did a lot of consulting work back when I was running strategic planning for Mr. Knight, back in the that had to be in the mid 80s, 85, 86 time period, and so we brought Bain in to do a lot of study work for us at that point in time, But it's interesting. I've been watching this lately. I know 3 or 4 CEOs that just died recently that I've known over the years from Alzheimer's. So it's a disease that's going to, I think, really impact a lot of people.
Keep exercising your brain, yeah.
Yeah, you got here, and they haven't found the cure yet. I can tell you right now, they have not found it. So that's not a good sign.
So 37 years, a lot's changed in that time. A lot hasn't changed. But when you think about your career, thinking about some of the big business changes over the arc of 37 years, what are some things that jump out to you?
I think from my perspective, from when I got engaged with business in 1981, coming out of business school, today it's a global business. We're on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. There's really no downtime, and so because you're doing business, you're transacting business constantly. I could do business 24 hours a day. So you have to figure out how to not to do that. But the world is so tight today, in an integrated world, versus what it was back when I first started out. I mean, we'd find out things from faxes. We'd find out things that might come a month or 2 months later after, by mail. We'd go to Asia maybe once every 2 or 3 years. You didn't travel, you just didn't get around the world like we get around the world today. And it's so integrated from the standpoint of what I see today. I mean, as I was saying, I was in Saudi Arabia, and
last week, right?
Just last week, last week, and it's just you're constantly connected in the world today, unlike any time period before. And you just look at the schools. The schools are much more connected now with different people. And that's a whole different world, and I think that's created a whole change in the economic cycles that I was taught under. There's just a general business economics cycles versus today, and because we're so connected, so when things line up, it goes well like they are right now, and when they break apart, they really unwind just as bad. So it's a whole different world, and our ability to work the world and to communicate in the world and get things done in real time. So I'm pretty famous for waking up in the middle of the night, going to my office at home and sending notes out and get people thinking about things and going back to sleep for a couple hours and getting up. You couldn't do that in the old days. I could sit there, I could wake up all night and do things. And by doing that, I actually learn how to shut down, because then I can sleep and I don't sit there and grind at my brain or whatever happens. So, but it's a whole different world compared to what it used to be like. We didn't have computers. I had the first PC in Emerson. The first PC, and what year was that? That had to be 1983, 84, and they kept it until I came all the way back from Asia, and I finally said, "Get rid of it. I don't need that thing anymore." A big old IBM XT or what the heck that thing was. I don't know what it was.
So when you think about things you learned at Owen that really helped you in your career, what were some of the things that you took away from the Owen School?
I think that. What I liked about Owen School, and what I've liked about most of the graduates, we've had a lot of graduates come out of Owen and work for Emerson, is that the broad breadth of education you get from the different topics, be it accounting, be it finance, be it operations, be it different economics. I think that what I find about the business school here is that you get a little bit of everything, and so you come out with a little foundation that we can build off of. And that's what I found when I came out of Owens. I had a pretty good understanding of corporate finance, which I went into when I went into Emerson. But at the same time, I also had a good sense of operations. And so when I look back at it now, I look at the fundamentals of, okay, what is a balance sheet? What's a P&L? How they tie together. I think you give them a very core foundation of the business knowledge base, which then we can build on over time. And also coming out of what I found out of Owens, was why we still recruit here, is that you have a broad breadth of skill sets of people coming into the program, and so we can see different types of people. And they're not all the same cookie cutters. They're not all wanting to be consultants, or they don't all want to be investment bankers. So that's one of the things I like about the school. But fundamentally, what I came out of this was a very good core foundation of business, which I did not have. And I grew up in a manufacturing plant with my dad. My dad was a plant manager, and I got the fundamentals. And I think Owens have always done a good job of teaching the fundamentals, and then working as a good team and coming out of that. And the people come out of the school are pretty good people to work with.
Yeah. So Emerson's known for this intense planning cycle. I think I've read that
Contact sport.
60% of your time, something like that, is
Yeah.
spent in that planning cycle.
Yeah.
Is that a unique attribute of Emerson? Do you see that as something that's different about Emerson or the culture?
I think that Emerson's always had a pretty strong focus on planning. It goes all the way back to Mr. Persons. I think that we are unique in certain respects that the executive level people are engaged in the planning from the day one. We use planning as a process to teach the young, the early generation. So people get engaged working with executives on developing presentation on a planning session. And then over time, you eventually give the presentation, and you learn how to give a presentation to a bigger group, and then you work your way around. But it is a way for us to educate and understand what's going on. And from that perspective, I know more about our company than most people know about the company. I can talk about anything within the company. The planning process allows us to sort of reinvent Emerson. So since I've been CEO, we've reinvented Emerson twice, and we talked about this last time. We made some tough decisions to shrink the company and do different things. Our planning process allows us to see what's going on and then say, okay, we have a problem, how we deal with that problem. And I think that companies get away from it. I watch what we went through in this whole repositioning effort that we started in the middle of late 95. And we sort of kept it quiet and then brought it back out real hard, not 95, 2015, and then brought it out in 2016, executed around it. It allows us to really stay engaged. And what's also interesting is I do quarterly calls, earnings call, which I'll do one in February. And not many CEOs will go into a quarterly call and talk about their earnings, about the company, and take field questions for a little bit over an hour without one piece of paper written in front of me. Most CEOs walk in, this is all typed up. This is what they're going to say. You don't go off the script. Period. I walk in with nothing, no piece of paper, and I sit there. My investor relations person will talk about the quarter. He goes through about 15, 20 minutes, and he says, "Dave, it's yours," and then I start talking, and I'll talk a little bit about talk about what I saw this quarter, commend the people, and then I take Q&A. I'm intimately involved in all organization planning. And so MBA level, Emily's around here somewhere. She knows from the side of the companies, I make the decisions, and where people are going to move to and what they're going to do in the development process. And I spend between planning and organization development probably 70-80% of my time. The rest would be customers and stuff like that. But I'm intimately involved in the people development and process of getting people in the right position to make sure that we have the people we need to run the company. Mm-hmm. And I know who they are. Mm-hmm.
And that does seem unique. I don't
Very
hear
unique.
many CEOs.
Very unique. I can tell you my top 50 people I can tell you the top 25 people I'd take into a battle. If a war broke out, I tell you who they are at all times. I can tell you who, right now, between now and I retire in 3 or 4 years, what are the 20 people I need to replace and who they are, and I probably have replacements for all but a couple of them. And so, it's just that way I'm sort of making sure that I'm increasing the odds on my side from that standpoint. Yeah. So it's different.
Was that something that you saw Chuck doing?
Chuck was very much involved in planning. I don't think, given the fact that I grew up inside the company, is a little bit different. He came in from the outside. He came in as CEO. I came in as a corporate finance whiz-bang from MBA Owens, OGSM. But I think that I've always enjoyed people. I've always enjoyed engaging with people, and it's a skill I like. Chuck did it, but not to the same level. But he definitely spent a lot of time on organization planning, and he brought that process to Emerson. That's what he did.
Well, you mentioned earlier about the global nature of business, and certainly your own travel calendar would prove that out. Was there a trip or an experience along the way that really began to drive that home for you and the importance for Emerson?
I'm going to give you 2 examples on this right now, thinking about that. The first one happened in 1992, probably around October, right? October 92. Mr. Knight, finally, we got him over to Asia, and I was running one of the businesses at that time. It was about $1 billion business, and I was over there. So in 92, Asia was still pretty small. It's about $300, $400 million for Emerson. We were probably, $5 or $6 billion in company size. But it was pretty clear all of a sudden, we get in the meeting, and we're in Singapore, and all of a sudden we look and said, we're $400 million, and in the next 2 or 3 years we're going to be $1.2 billion. And all of a sudden the commitment that we were going to have in people and capital was like, Chuck just took a timeout. He came out, he said, time. He went back to his room and he called a couple people around. I was not part of that group, but I was just outside. And he said, we've got an issue here. I'm not going to be able to manage this from St. Louis. We're going to have to get some people here that I trust. Eventually what happened, I got back home and I was living in Cleveland because we hadn't moved from Cleveland back to St. Louis yet from our previous job. And he called me and said, Dave, will you move to Asia? Will you consider moving to Asia? I said, because I can't get any of the other guys to do it. You're too young. So you got to think about, I'm 37 at this point in time. Will you go over and be the president of Asia? And I said, let me talk to my wife on this one. Let me think. I'll fly down. So this is over Thanksgiving. So I flew down Thanksgiving dinner, have it with Chuck in St. Louis. But that was the first experience I had internationally, where all of a sudden we saw our business pivot. And as you well know, one of the reasons I've got the CEO job, because we drove the business to being nothing to being 37, 38% of our sales. And we became very important in Asia. Right. We are still today known in Asia with a strong presence in China. And we really created that strategy. And we just launched a new innovation center. We had started building it. It took us 3 years to get it done. Saudi bureaucracy, but we got it done. And our focus is going to be around innovations, our 9th one within the business platform, and we tie them all together. And what's unique about it is that for the first time, we are now allowed to hire females into the center. And right now, half of the new hires are females. And it's a beautiful center. It's a little more open than this, a little bit hot. Saudi Arabia's hot and obviously a lot of windows and open and stuff like that, but it's a very nice place to work.
I've got a few personal questions, then we'll turn it over to them. So I know, and you've told me many times that you travel relentlessly and work like crazy, but you also manage to make sure you save time to stay fit and work out and so forth. How do you put that all together? I've always figured out how to get the time, either early in the morning or lunch or late at night. I still work out quite a bit. I have a trainer. I do 3 or 4 times a week. I try to get cardio 1 or 2. I'll go up and down the way because you're eating too much constantly. I hit late dinners and under pressure. Pressure has you tendency to eat. But I've always figured out how to work in my calendar. If you look at my travel schedule, it says this is a time to break for me to work out, either before dinner or if I have to early in the morning. And people will also realize if they don't give me that time, I get kind of irritable because it allows me to sort of adjust my body clock to the time zone a lot easier. It also, because I fly our own planes, I arrive before I get into a place like I went to Dubai first. I arrive at 5:30 at night. I have an hour and a half workout, take a shower, go to bed. I've learned my body clock over the years, how I can adjust my body clock. So I've always forced myself to do that when I travel, to work out at least 60 to 90 minutes every day when I travel. Even if I don't want to do it, I force myself to do it. And even if it's a light workout, but I'm just going through the motion. And but that gets your blood going in the light and things like that. So I've always done it. It helps me keep my energy level up, and then because they're long days. You go early in the morning to late at night, and then they have dinners, and then they have customer stuff. And if you don't figure out how to do that, you'd be huge, and you just would not have the energy. Yeah. So I've always done it, and it's always, you look at my schedule, it's always in there. It's like break, we're gonna break from 5 to 6:30 for Dave to work out. It always says workout and emails now. Workout and emails and phone calls. And so I got to do all those things at the same time. So what do you do for fun then? Is fun on the schedule?
Fun's on the schedule.
I've heard you encourage folks at Emerson.
You got to have fun. I think that what you have to learn how to do is you have to learn how to compartmentalize what you do. And so I work full out, and then I break. And I've learned how to say, okay, I'm engaged, then I disengage. So my disengagement is I work out. It allows me to work out. It allows me to disengage, and I try to not be thinking about work per se, or I spend time with my family, my wife, or my kids. I mean, I take my vacations. I'll play golf from time to time, but I've always learned how to disengage. But when I'm engaged, I'm pretty hard engaged, and then you have to learn how to break it. So, by doing that allows me to get some downtime. I force my downtime, and I read, as we were talking about, I read books. Allows me to get my mind different somewhere else. If my family found out if I can't figure out how to disengage and something's really bothering me, something's working on me, and my wife sees it, my kids see it, or someone sees it, they have to allow me to work through it. Because if they force me out of it, then it's always going to be grinding me. So my family over the years have learned when we're on vacation that the best time for Dad to get things done is early. I'm a morning person, so I'll get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock. I get things, I'll make coffee, I get it done. Maybe I'm done by 8 o'clock, and I don't touch it before I go to bed. And so if I'm halfway around the world, that's what I do. And my kids will learn, don't try to stop that from Dad, or you'll have something bad will happen during the daytime. But from my perspective, as you said, I like to have fun, and it's a way for me to engage with people. It allows me to get to know people a little bit, and relax around them and learn about their family, have a little fun with them. Jab them a little bit, about their schools or what's going on in their life and things like that. But I tell people, if you can't have fun, life's too short. Get the hell out. You go do something else. And I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy it with passion. And if you can't tell, I still like it. And so I tell people, when they can keep up with me, they can take my job.
You want to leave us with one last leadership lesson?
Yeah, I think the one thing, I've said it already a couple of times, I think that I encourage all of you that if you really want, two things you have to do. You've got to make an impact. And so you've got to find, where can you find that impact wedge? How do you create that wedge? And then how do you drive that wedge to make an impact? And you want to find those as soon as you can in a company you're going to go work, or where organization. And throughout your career, you want to find them and drive them. Find them and drive them. And as you grow up in the organization, if that's what you want to do, then you got to find bigger wedges, bigger impacts. The last thing that I tell you, also, everyone in their career will get to a point and say, man, I don't really want to go any higher. Then I encourage you to do this. If you're successful and you're working your way through an organization, and you say you reach, VP or running a business or something like that, or whatever it is, whatever you're doing, spend a couple all-nighters and sit down. Okay, if I stop now, and I don't continue to drive forward to do something else and make an impact somewhere else, will I be happy in 10 or 15 years? Will I be happy? And some people say yes, and some people will say no. And then you say, okay, what is it about right now that bothers me? What do I need to change, and what do I have to alter this course? And then how do I get to that next level on the plateau? And everyone, I don't care who you are, I did it. You reach that point, and you've got to figure out, okay, am I happy? I'm always going to be happy, or I'm going to be miserable. And so then figure out how to get there. And I got the notes from my time period still today, handwritten notes. With that, I'll let you go.
David, thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.